Chaos has returned to the streets of Hong Kong as the city marks the 23rd anniversary of its return to China. More than 180 people have been arrested so far today. You're looking at live pictures now from Hong Kong. Now, 7 people are suspected of violating Beijing's new national security law. Protesters have been blocking major roads on Hong Kong Island for hours, chanting slogans, and some have been calling for Hong Kong's independence. And despite repeated warnings from police to disperse, crowds are not letting up. Police have fired rounds of tear gas and used water cannon to try to disperse crowds blocking roads. Officers at one point were seen raising a new purple flag, and it's a warning to crowds that their conduct could constitute an offence under the new national security law. Now, in a moment, we're going to go live to Wei Du, who's standing by in Causeway Bay. But first, a look at how official Hong Kong marked the day.
Hong Kong held its annual handover flag-raising ceremony at Bohemia Square just hours after the controversial national security law formally came into force. Hong Kong's leader, Carrie Lam, former city leaders and top mainland Chinese officials attended the ceremony amid a heavy police presence. The ceremony went on as crowds of protesters gathered nearby. While pro-Beijing supporters celebrate the city's return to the motherland, the pro-democracy camp usually holds a massive July 1st rally. But for the first time in 17 years, police have banned the demonstration, citing COVID-19 restrictions and recent protest violence. Mrs. Lam says failures in governance have caused the city's crisis, but the national security law will now strengthen the one country, two systems principle.
The purpose of this piece of legislation is not just to punish, it is also to deter people from committing such serious offenses as secession, subverting the state power, terrorist activities. This law prohibits very, very serious offenses. Because of the severity of the offenses, they attract very heavy penalties. But I still believe that the great majority of Hong Kong people are law-abiding citizens. They love the country, they love Hong Kong.
She stressed that enforcing the national security law remains with local authorities, and only a handful of cases will be handed over to Beijing's National Security Office in Hong Kong.
For the latest, let's speak with Wei Du in Hong Kong. Wei, get us up to speed then. Protesters are still very much on the streets.
Not exactly, Steve. Actually, we're right now in Causeway Bay. You see behind us, about half an hour ago, a small group of protesters were still occupying this area. They pulled out the paving stones to set up this roadblock. About half an hour ago, police officers came in very quickly and chased them off, and now the traffic officers have come in to clear the roadblocks. It appears all the protesters have left. That said, though, it has been a long day, 7 hours of tug and war between protesters and police, during which neither side seemed to intend on taking total control of the streets. For the protesters, they simply didn't have the numbers, so they've decided to be nimble and mobile. But for the police, actually, it seems that their primary concern was to keep the streets open. So they used primarily pepper pellets and the water cannon truck, driving very fast on the main streets between Causeway Bay and Hong Kong. And actually, in fact, we ourselves took a targeted blast earlier today. Now, at its peak, this protest probably drew about 2,000 protesters onto the streets. That is a far cry from the usual July 1st rallies here in Hong Kong that routinely used to draw hundreds of thousands of people. Two things are different this year. Now, for one, this is the first time since the handover when the rally was banned on coronavirus concerns. Officially, that's the reason the police gave. But also, today is the first day since the national security law came into force here in the city. That became a reality at 11 o'clock last night. A lot of legal scholars, after reading the full law, says despite all these leaks and anticipations, it still appeared tougher and more vaguely defined and harsher. So that could potentially deter a lot of moderate protesters as well. Guys.
Some people were arrested under this new national security law. Question is, how exactly did they violate that law?
Yeah, Glenna, you're right. We are reasonably confident that the first two arrests were made because the people were found to have in their possession banners advocating Hong Kong independence. And we're not exactly sure under what circumstances the other 5 arrests were made. So we're not sure if anyone got arrested for chanting Hong Kong independence slogans, even though earlier today the Hong Kong government did send out a warning to protesters telling them that by doing so they were in breach of the law. Potentially, if charged, these protesters could face very heavy sentences. For active participation, the law says there's a minimum sentence of 3 years. The minimum sentencing is something that didn't exist in Hong Kong until yesterday. So that is bound to be hugely controversial. And also, what defines and what separates active participation and other participation that only would incur a lower sentence. These are also legal concepts that didn't exist in Hong Kong's common law system. So in terms of the prosecution, we will find out. But these cases are bound to be hugely controversial once again. Glenna.
Thanks for getting us up to speed. Away to speaking to us from Hong Kong.